All right, so for our first hybrid B day, you guys are going to be working on a Math 7 review worksheet. So I'm going to provide a kind of review video to help you remember some of the things that you learned last year. So looking at, let me move this, I actually need the arrow keys instead. First one, you guys did a lot of work with fractions and rational numbers last year. So on the worksheet, you will be adding and subtracting, multiplying and dividing fractions. So we're going to start by adding. In order to add, and in this case as well as subtract fractions, you have to have common denominators. Denominators. I can't spell denominator. I think that's an A right there. Common denominators, there's an I in there as well. I think it might even be IA. Sorry, my handwriting is not very good. I haven't written with one of these things in a while. So to start off, if you just have a regular fraction like 2/5, and we're going to add that with 3/7, before you can add these two together, our denominators of 5 and 7 have to be the same number. So you got to think of a number that both 5 and 7 go into. You would prefer to find the smallest number, but any number will do. So if it's two numbers that you're not 100% sure, find one that you know for a fact. So I know both 5 and 7 go into 70, so I could use that as my common denominator, but I'll have a little bit of extra work at the end because it's not the smallest possible answer. So in this case, the smallest possible answer is 35. So we're going to make both of them be 35s on the bottom. So for that to happen, 5 has to multiply 7, and 7 has to multiply 5. So it happened to be that we had to just multiply the denominators by the other to make it 35. Anything you do to the bottom of a fraction, you have to make sure you do to the top, which means we have 14 35ths all over 15 35ths. Now that we have common denominators, we're allowed to add. We just add the top numbers in this case. So we get 29 35ths. Mixed fractions, so let's say we have 3 and 1/3, and we're going to add that with 5 and 1, let's say 1/6. Mixed fractions, we are going to add the similar objects. So the 3 and the 5 are going to be added together, while the 1/3 and the 1/6 will be added together. If we happen to have any sort of remainders or carryovers, we will address that as we go through. So we'll try another example where we have one of those after this one. So I take the 3 and the 5, I add them together. I get 8. So I've already used the 3 and the 5, so I don't really need to worry about it. And it brings us back to the same thing before. I have to add these two fractions, which means I have to have common denominators. Whoops, it's already a 3. So the common denominator between 3 and 6, ow, I did it again, I'm sorry. I'm still thinking about 3, is 6. So notice that this one doesn't have to change at all, so that stays 1/6. But in order for this 3 to become a 6, I had to multiply by 2. So I'm going to multiply the top by 2. I add those together, and I end up getting 3/6 as my fraction. We always need to simplify any fractions that we have. So the 8 stays, but 3/6 can be simplified. Both 3 goes into both of these. So 3 goes into 3 one time, 3 goes into 6 two times. So our final answer is 8 and 1/2. So if we had a mixed fraction where we might have a remainder, let's say we had 2 and 2/3, and we're going to add that with 3 and 5/7. I add my whole numbers out in front. That gives us 5. Then my fractions, I need them to both be this common denominator, so I'm going to multiply this by 7, this one by 3. So we get 14 over 21 plus 15 over 21. Add those together, we get 29 over 21. Bringing this to a mixed fraction, 21 goes into 29 one full time, with a remainder of 8 21sts. To tack these two components together, the 5 and the 1 go together, give us 6, and the 8 21st goes on the outside. Multiplying fractions, same kind of idea. Let's start with some mixed fractions. Let's say we have 3 and 2/3. We're going to multiply that by 5, just a regular old number. What has to happen is this is two components here, so this 5 is going to multiply both pieces. Now what I find to be more helpful in this case is to convert any mixed fraction into an improper fraction. So before I do this, because I don't want to have to remember to multiply two parts, especially if I also had a fraction here, this 1/2, this 1/2 would also have to multiply both of these. And then at the end I'm going to have to add all of those numbers together. And to me that's just a lot of stuff to remember. So instead, what I would do is I would convert this mixed fraction into an improper fraction. So we're going to multiply the 3 times 3, and we're going to add it with 2. So 3 times 3 gives us 9. 9 plus the 2 gives us 11/3. We're going to multiply that by 5. That is 5 over 1 as a fraction. So I multiplied the numbers on top. 11 times 5, so I get 55. 3 times 1 gives us 3. We can take this back down to a mixed fraction if we want, but I'm going to leave it as an improper fraction right here as long as it's fully simplified. So let's try another one where let's say it's 3 and 2/3, and we're going to multiply that by 2 and 1/4. First thing I would do is convert them both into improper fractions. Let's make this 2/5 because we just did 2/3. So we'll take 5 times 3, which gives us 15, plus 2, so we get 17/5. 2 times 4 gives us 8. 8 plus 1 gives us 9, so we have 9/4. We then multiply straight across. I know we get 20 on the bottom. I'm not 100% sure what 17 times 9 is off the top of my head. I think it's 153, but I'm not. Yep, 153. We check to see if this is simplifiable. 2 doesn't go into both of them. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I believe that is as simple as possible. Next thing on that homework is a proportion. So proportions are when we have two ratios set up next to each other. So if we have like x over 3, that's equal to 12 over 21. For our proportions, we multiply, so we don't want the 3 on the bottom. So we're going to multiply by 3, like this. And then we don't want the 21 on the bottom, so we're going to do the same thing, but I don't want to write it too much. So we have x equals the 3 and the 12 multiply because they're both on the top of the fraction, so we get 36 over 21. Multiply both sides by 21. Or actually, in this case, we don't have to. So now that x is by itself, we don't have to multiply it with x like this. We simplify this. 3 goes into both of it. 3 goes into 36 12 times. 3 goes into 21 7 times, so our answer is 12 sevenths. If we had a proportion with x on the bottom, and let's say 8, what we're going to do is we're going to multiply by x. That way we have 4 is equal to 5x over 8. Multiply by the 8 here. 8's cancel out, leave us with 32 equals 5x. Divide emojis. Divide both sides by 5. And so our answer is x equals 32 fifths. Another thing on the worksheet are ratios. So I want to know if ratios are the same, if they are actually ratios or if they're proportions. So let's say we have 12 thirteenths, and I want to compare it to 5 sixths. Are these actually the same fraction, just in two different sizes? To check that, we're going to cross multiply. 6 times 12 gives us 72. 13 times 5 gives us, so that's 50, gives us 65. Because these are not equal, they are not a proportion. So that's how we check to see if something is a proportion or not. Similar figures are very similar to, so if you have a triangle, this side's x, this side's 10. A similar looking triangle, and this side is 6 and this side is 8. We're going to set up a proportion. So we have x over 10, which means 6 over 8. So notice that these two are the same side, so they're on the same part of the fraction, x and 6 like this. We're going to multiply 10 times 6, x times 8, so we get 8x equals 60. Divide both sides by 8. So in this case, we get 60 over 8, so we have to simplify this fraction. Both 4 goes into this, so 4 goes into 60. 15 goes into 8 2 times. You can also grab our calculator and divide it and get a decimal. 60 divided by 8 gives us 7.54x. Percents, say I have 38%. If I want to convert it to a decimal, decimal point's right here. For percents, to convert it to a decimal, we move it 2 spots to the left. So 38% is 0.38. If we want to convert into a percent, say we have 2.3, want to convert it into a percent, we move it 2 spots to the right, so that's 230%. Markups and discounts. So if I have an item that's $15.70 and it's on discount for 30%, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this 15.7, I'm going to multiply it by the discount here, but it has to be a decimal. So I have to take this 30%, I have to make it a decimal, 0.3, and I'm going to multiply. So I take 15.7 times 0.3, and I get that $4.71. So that's how much I have to take off of the price. So it was $15.70. I have to subtract $4.71. Turns out that this item after the discount is $10.99. Markups are the same thing, but in the end, instead of adding this or subtracting this number for a discount, so discounts we subtract, markups you would add. And last but not least, simple interest. So simple interest formula is interest is equal to the principal times the rate times the time. So if I start with $1,000, that's our initial principal. My rate is going to be 2% a year, and I'm going to do this for 7 years. First thing I have to do is I have to convert this to a decimal, 0.02. Again, here's the decimal point, move it 2 spots to the left. And so the amount of interest I stand to gain over these 7 years is 1,000 times 0.02 times 7. So the interest for that amount of years is $140.